My presentation looks at 18th century women of the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture. The presentation reviews the lives and careers of 4 women admitted to the Academy in the 18th century. To understand the significance of this achievement, a short history of the Academy is necessary. It was established in 1648 by order of Louis XIV on the direction and certainly the persuasion of Charles Le Brun. Its purpose was to regulate and establish the standards of artistic production in France, to provide a structured training system to produce artists for royal commissions, to mount regular exhibitions known as the Salon, to provide a platform for artists to showcase their works and therefore garner commissions. Their training followed a strict curriculum of drawing, composition, precision, and clarity. It followed a set path, building upon skills to culminate in mastery of drawing the live nude. They followed a standard hierarchy of importance in art. history painting, portraits, genre and landscape, and still life. What about their power and influence? It was great. It was state funded, and it definitely shaped public taste through the exhibitions. It was the determinant for recognition and ultimately success for artists. So, what happened? In the end, the Academy was dissolved in 1793 through the New Republic, which was formed after the Revolution. Many of the assets were confiscated and destroyed, and subsequent academies continued to shape French art education, maybe never in such a strong manner as the original Academy. Four women were admitted as full members in the second half of the 18th century. They are Marie-Thérèse Rebouvienne, Anne Vallier-Coster, Adelaide Labille-Guiard, and Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun. In research for this project, I discovered the artist Marie-Suzanne Guirost, also known as Madame Roslin. She was admitted to the Academy in 1770. That's the same year as Anne Vallier-Coster. She was a painter, miniaturist, and pastel artist known mostly for her portraiture. She passed away in 1772 at the age of 38. So let's look at the history of female membership in the Academy. In 1662, the Academy admitted its first female member, Catherine Duchemin. She's pictured in the upper left corner. There was no stipulation at that time regulating the number of women who could join. By 1706, 6 women were members. Also in 1706, the men of the Academy were prompted by the news that, quote, several have planned to present themselves to be received as academicians. The Academy then decreed that no woman would be admitted. This resolution did not have the force of law without royal consent, was not adhered to, and a few more women were elected to the Academy before the admission of Suzanne Roslin and Vallier-Coster in 1770. And that is Suzanne pictured in the lower right, since she's otherwise left out of this presentation. But shortly after, the women's membership was limited to 4. So what was this fear of women all about? Well, the usual, I guess. The fear of admitting women aligned with the morals of the times. And those were that women who presented themselves in the public sphere beyond their private roles of wife and mother were considered to have low morals. It was believed also that exposure to the nude for training purposes would be harmful to women. Women admitted as teachers would create chaos in the halls of the Louvre because of the proximity to men. And skeptics often attributed women's artwork to the male artists in their lives, believing them incapable of producing their own work. So let's get back to the meat of this presentation. We'll look at the lives and careers of these pioneering women of the 18th century. So Marie-Thérèse, Anne, Elizabeth, and Adelaide. First of all, Marie-Thérèse was the earliest one admitted of this group. She married Joseph Marie Vienne, who was also an artist, in 1757. That's the same year she was admitted as an academician, only at the age of 22. Also, that sparkling year, she received her first commission as an artist, and they were shell illustrations for the publication of a book called The Natural History of Senegal, Shells. She's known for her very detailed and accurate depiction of nature. She also collaborated with her husband quite a bit, and she's believed that she assisted her husband by painting the flora and fauna used in his paintings. She served as his model for many paintings. In 1788, she survived a bout of smallpox, but it left her severely scarred. She became very reclusive at that point, but continued painting privately. Here's 2 examples of Marie-Thérèse's work. On the left, you see that early commission of hers where she depicts the very detailed work of the shells that were found in Senegal. And on the right is this really charming painting, or pastel rather, of 2 pigeons on a tree branch. That's from 1762. She exhibited this work in the Salon of 1763. But as you can see, her work is extremely detailed and very accurately portrayed. It is mostly nature related. Next, we'll look at Anne Vallier-Coster. She was trained most likely under her parents. Her mother was a miniaturist and her father was a goldsmith. She was admitted to the Academy in 1770 at the age of 26. She was also the only single woman who was granted lodging in the Louvre. She married Jean-Pierre Sylvestre Coster in 1781. Her specialties were still lifes of portraits, nature, and portraits. She had very important patrons, including Queen Marie Antoinette and the Mesdames Adelaide and Victoire, the daughters of Louis XV. She was very popular, was never associated with any scandals, and she had a Rococo style. Here's an interesting, very interesting and beautiful work that she did that, in my mind, rivals Chardin. An interesting detail is called out by one article, and it says linen cloth. James Singer wrote an article, Masterpiece Story, Still Life with Mackerel, and he explores the remarkable painting in detail, along with his praise for her mastery of color, composition, and imitation or illusion. He explains that the linen cloth represents Anne's pride in her domesticity. In an 18th century household, the pressed folds are a sign of good housekeeping. They show that the housekeeper has ironed and folded the tablecloth before storing it. On the corner of the white cloth, embroidered in red thread, are the letters V and C for their last name, and the letter 6 signifying this is the sixth tablecloth of the household. Her still life work rivals Chardin, who is considered the icon of 18th century French still life. While Chardin died 8 years before Mackerel was completed, they still might have shared an active artistic period together in the 1770s. Anne is most associated with her many still lifes, floral, food, nature, hunting, but she was also an accomplished portraitist. This portrait of a violinist is a charming piece and shows her mastery of likeness and displays a different painting technique than the floral shown at left. That brings me to Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun. She is our longest lived artist that we're looking at today, and a very interesting life. She trained with her father and copied works of the old masters. She began receiving portrait commissions in her teens, and in 1776 she received her first royal commission, which was a portrait of the Comte de Provence, who became the future King Louis XVIII. She was admitted to the Academy in 1783, and she also enjoyed Queen Marie Antoinette's patronage and backing. She painted over 30 portraits of the Queen. Some say that the Queen was the one who backed her for admission to the Academy. Who knows? Her style is Rococo and neoclassical. Her paintings were often described using feminine adjectives associated with that Rococo period, such as charming, graceful, pretty, and or seductive. She was incredibly prolific as an artist. Estimates are that she did over 660 portraits and 200 landscapes. Elizabeth had such a long and varied life that she requires a whole other slide. She married at age 20 to Jean-Baptiste Pierre Lebrun. It was considered an escape from her difficult stepfather. It was also under weird and unusual circumstances. They wed in secret. Her husband was engaged to another at the time, and that was to secure a business deal. Unfortunately for Elizabeth, the rumors of his gambling, womanizing, and adultery turned out to be true. She finally demanded the refund of her dowry in 1802. She was involved in scandals. It is believed she had 2 or more affairs during her marriage. She and her husband also hosted salons in their large house. That brought her many new important contacts and commissions. She needed to flee France to escape the Reign of Terror in 1793 due to her strong ties to the royals. In her 12-year absence from France, she lived and worked in Italy, Austria, Russia, and Germany. During that time, she received many portrait commissions in these foreign courts, and she remained a committed loyalist throughout her life. Let's look at some of her work. Madame Lebrun was known primarily for her portraiture. It is believed she was supporting herself through portrait commissions while still a teenager. This charming portrait on the right is Lebrun's brother Etienne. It was completed in 1773 when she was 20 years old. Her composition shows her brother looking back over his shoulder as if someone has called to him. The dark muted tones focus attention on the face and expression. This painting is in the St. Louis Art Museum, where I was able to visit it recently. The next work we'll look at is probably my favorite of hers. The subject of this striking portrait is one of three ambassadors from India. They arrived in Paris seeking support from Louis XVI to defeat the British forces in India. Of course, they created a great sensation with the Parisian population. Madame Lebrun was determined to paint them, but the trio would not pose for a female unless the king personally requested it. It is a sign of her great favor with the court that the king arranged this for her. The monumental life-size portrait delivers an intensity not usually evident in her work. The commanding pose, the clothing, and the dagger capture the exotic power that inspired the French. This is the only remaining portrait of the three diplomats. Unfortunately, they failed in their mission and were beheaded upon their return to India. The painting fared much better, selling for $7.18 million in 2019. The next artist we're going to look at is Adelaide Labille-Guiard. Before we delve into her life, I want to compare Elizabeth and Adelaide. Are they colleagues or were they rivals? Elizabeth and Adelaide were elected as members of the Academy on the very same day in 1783. Elizabeth was 28 years old and Adelaide was 34. Many painted them as rivals, but there really is no real evidence of that. They were accustomed to displaying their works together in the same venues and would continue to do so at the biennial salon exhibitions. They both were painters of the court of Louis XVI, but other than that, their paths navigating the Revolution and the Reign of Terror were very different. Elizabeth left France for Italy and did not return for 12 years. Adelaide remained in France, leaving Paris for the French countryside only during the Reign of Terror. An early critic described their styles from a venue where they were both exhibiting, saying, Elizabeth, with charming productions and personal graces, and Adelaide, perfect resemblance and vigor. Although they were both unhappily married, their personal circumstances otherwise were very different. Elizabeth could exhibit her work in her husband's gallery. The Lebruns hosted salons in their large house, attracting possible patrons. In contrast, Adelaide, separated from her husband, lived in rented quarters and needed to support herself. Both of them wanted very much to be successful artists. So let's go on to Adelaide, my fourth artist that we're looking at today. She was not part of an artistic family, but her father owned a fashionable clothing shop in an area where many artists lived and worked. At age 20, she married, and then she legally separated 10 years later. For her training, she studied with François-Elie Vincent and his son, François-André, and Quentin Latour. She was admitted to the Academie in 1783 at age 34. She was very committed to teaching female students. She was the only one of the female Academy members remaining in France during the Revolutionary era. She was very politically active. She supported a constitutional monarchy, and she retreated to the French countryside during the Reign of Terror, really to escape the chaos. Her style was Rococo and neoclassical. Her family recognized her talent, and at 14 she began training with her neighbor, the miniaturist François Vincent. His son, François-André, was a winner of the Prix de Rome, and upon his return in 1775, Adelaide became his student. Their friendship was lifelong, and the two would marry in 1800 when the Republic allowed for divorce. Adelaide portrays him here as a young man on the left and an older man on the right. Her portrait shown here of the sculptor Augustin Pajot was her first reception painting accepted by the Academy. At a first salon showing, Adelaide chose to exhibit her portraits of current Academy artists to demonstrate her network of support. She also included portraits of popular actors shown in their stage roles. This 1783 salon exhibited three females, two of them in their debuts. Pamphleteers selling guides capitalized on this oddity, mostly in a lighthearted way. One pamphlet suggested Adelaide had traded sexual favors for painting assistance. A quote, "His love makes your talent, love dies and talent falls." This was a reference to her rumored affair with the painter and teacher François-André. The pamphlet also accused her of having 2,000 lovers. Adelaide turned to a supporter for assistance. She asked for help in bringing the culprit to task on behalf of female artists. She cited censorship laws to use for their arrest and conviction. A bookseller was arrested and fined. Remaining copies of the pamphlet were removed. Yet the author was never identified. My research did not uncover a lot of self-portraits of Adelaide. However, this one at the left might be not only her self-portrait, but also her most well-known painting. It was exhibited at the Salon of 1785. At this time in her career, she was well known as a portrait painter, but she was seeking to broaden her client base. This painting presents her skills to a broad potential audience, and she does that in many ways. She's wearing an elaborate outfit to showcase her talent in depicting many luxurious textures and fabrics. She set herself in a professional studio showing all the tools of a professional portrait artist, and the group setting could be reimagined for a family portrait. This large canvas indicates she is capable of painting at a large scale. She's included items that show her range of technical skills, such as the furniture, the bust, and the parchment. She is dressed in current fashion. Interestingly, the biographer Laura Arricchio comments that an X drawn from corner to corner would center on her breasts. I tried this, and it's true. This display of her body is countered by the bust of her father in the mid-upper left of the compositions. While she is dressed in a somewhat provocative manner, her students are demurely dressed. On the basis of the rave reception this piece received at the Salon, she requested lodging in the Louvre. At this point, she was denied. And let's look at some of her portraits. The court paintings of the Mesdames Adelaide and Victoire, the aunts of Louis XVI, display her talent as a portrait artist and clearly indicate her favor with the court. Considering the revolution is close at hand at this time, 88 and 87, her transition from court painter with compensation and space at the Louvre to portraits of revolution and Republican figures is remarkable. The inset shows the enormous scale of the portraits. So how did Adelaide navigate these whole chaotic times? She returned to Paris in 1795. Of course, it was to a changed world, both politically and artistically. The Academy no longer existed in its previous state. Other institutions popped up in its place, but none wielded the power of the original. Regardless, none of them accepted women. Salon exhibitions were open to all. The proliferation of females exhibiting was evident in their participation. For Adelaide, this was a double-edged sword. She had championed the inclusion of women. Now that the restrictions on submissions were lifted, Adelaide became just one of many female exhibitors. She was no longer singled out for her gender. In 1795, 18 women exhibited 43 works. These numbers continued to grow throughout the decade. Sadly, by 1800, the tide began to turn once again to opposition of women's participation. Her work in this period exhibited a neoclassical style of portrait reflecting the times. A sober palette, casual stances, everyday attire, and pleasant expressions can be seen in the three portraits shown here. Her last important piece, exhibited in 1800, is the portrait of a family. It is lost today, and we only have descriptions of it. But in that portrait, she is attuned to the turn-of-the-century popular feeling and style of the happy domesticity. It's a setting within a home with mothers and daughters clearly subservient to fathers and brothers. She married her longtime companion, Vincent, in 1800. They lived in lodgings at the Louvre, together with Adelaide's other longtime companion, her former student, Capet. Adelaide died in 1803 at the age of 54. I've not been able to determine a cause in the research that I've done. This slide shows a portrait that is considered a tribute to Adelaide. It was done by her student, Marie Gabrielle, 5 years after Adelaide's death. In it, the student creates the scene of Adelaide creating Vienne's portrait. It offers two perspectives of female painters. Adelaide is the plainly garbed, hardworking artist. Capet portrays herself as the hobbyist, with a protective cloth covering her lap. To achieve admittance to the Academy, these four remarkable women were more than just talented artists. They had to diplomatically navigate the political and social scene, cultivate the right patronage, be in the right place at the right time, and avoid beheading. They differed in social status, family background, artistic training, and styles. They all had in common an ambition to practice at the highest level available to them, and that was acceptance to the Academy. Thank you.